This night of the harvest moon, I'm going to cover a big one, Stranger in a Strange Land. Uh, there's often an apocryphal story passed around that Heinlein, Frank Herbert, and L. Ron Hubbard made a bet who could make, the best fake religion. Sometimes Asimov is thrown in there too. The dates kind of don't line up very well. But, and the most likely origin for that story is that it's something that came out between Hubbard and Campbell at one of Campbell's dinner parties, and then maybe trickled to others or whatever, and maybe sat around in the backs of their head. Hubbard had made statements like, if you want to make $1 million, start a religion. Back significantly earlier, like 1948, I think it was. Anyway. My own story with this is relatively limited. I think this is only the second time I've read the book. And I mean, this is one of the greats of what I see as the true golden era of science fiction, right? I didn't realize how early it was written. And that influences some of my discussion. I actually made a list of notes that I want to deal with, because there's enough going on here and enough of importance. And I'm not going to cover everything, certainly not everything about the story or whatnot at all. This is more my reactions to this and whatnot. But I read it before high school because I think it was in 9th grade high school English. We had a science fiction class, and we were assigned a huge reading list of books. And I'm like, I read most of these not that long ago, within the last couple of years, whatever. I can get, I can skip the ones that I've read already. Kind of saddened. I don't think Asimov was on that list at all. Both this and Dune were. I know Clockwork Orange was. Probably Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451. But I would have really, really liked to look at the Asimov side of things, because it's got a very different feel. And I don't think I've read it since then. I think I got it out of the library because books that I actually owned, I read and reread. So things, other Heinlein books, like I recently did, what is it? Time Enough for Love? Is that the one? Or maybe I Will Fear No Evil. I Will Fear No Evil was the most recent one. Those books are from the 70s. This one is 1961. And I think it's the first time that Heinlein really expresses a lot of the stuff that makes its way into all his other later books, or almost all of them. The books from the 70s onward, because this had become such a big deal and had become something of an ideal in the hippie movement and whatnot, the free love communities, and sharing all your goods in a commune and everything like that. And being at home just naked, right? Like, that was something my dad brought up when he was teaching, early on when he was teaching. He went to, like a student's housing to get a free cat. Somebody had put a thing up, free kittens, whatever. He picked one up. That may actually be where we got our two kittens, but I don't know. I thought they came from a store because we returned one of them that I grew up with. But he walks in and everybody's just sitting around naked, smoking bongs and whatnot. And it was just one of those little stories that came up from that time. I need to switch pipes because I think I need a pipe while I'm doing that. But anyhow, this book was sort of the first that showed the signs that in those later books in the early 70s, and then the ones that stretched, he kept writing until he was very old. The ones that stretched out, we'll get to his age in a bit. Similar themes and whatnot. The free love, the communal living, a whole bunch of stuff along those lines. I don't want to touch all the bents here at once, but anyhow, all of that kind of, and the same kind of philosophy in general in a lot of ways. All of that kind of bloomed again in the 70s. I don't know if there was something in between, but it could well have been that the way this was received and adopted and embraced by that new generation was just so appealing to him, in addition to these already being ideas that kick around in his head and had appealed to him already. That he just sort of settled on that as kind of a formulaic part of what he would write, as opposed to a lot of his earlier stuff, which focused, sometimes on military type ways of dealing with things, sometimes more on the hero's journey type of thing, sometimes more on a business view that feels almost Ayn Randian, because he marries this incredibly hippie type ideal, right, with a libertarian type of view of the rugged individual and everything, and that actually fits rather nicely. And then this very weird sort of construction of politics and business that feels almost naive in its, do you really think you could get away with that? And this book shows it, but earlier books did too. The Man Who Sold the Moon, for example, which was just a short story. But I think it was included in The Moon as a harsh mistress, creating a single timeline of sorts. But you're seeing that same kind of sort of manipulating business and politics in a way that's like, that's a cute game. You're glossing over a lot, and that's covering a lot of unbelievable stuff. Anyhow, let me get to his age, because this was a big deal to me. I went and looked it up. I had assumed he was probably born in the 1920s. With most of the authors, the Asimov, the Clarke, the Bradbury. Well, Bradbury's a little bit earlier, but not much. Herbert, that he was more, and Hubbard and whatnot, he was more of that age, sort of the second generation of the science fiction, past the pulps into this golden era, but before the new wave. And this is sort of like it's not new wave in that most of the writing feels very much like, other writing that, was in that golden era. But in some ways, the tackling of the particular types of concepts it has, etc., feels like a precursor to that new wave of science fiction, which comes, maybe a little before the books that I think of from the 70s or whatnot. But the late 60s, there was sort of a blossoming of a different kind of science fiction. And you can see where where Dune, which is 65 or so, they're working their way towards it. Dune really shows that new wave, sort of a proto-new wave aspect to it, which is some of what I don't really like about it. It's like the writing style is starting to get experimental in it. Anyway, but yeah, he was born in 1907, which means by the time he wrote this, he was nearly as old as I am, which shows in some ways. One of the things that I kept questioning was, he's already taking an almost glowing view of this older patriarch type figure in a way that doesn't feel like it showed up that much in his earlier writing, but really starts to overwhelm you in, by 1970s, but certainly even later than that. Time Enough to Love is definitely of that nature, where that's the Lazarus Longing story, right? Where it's all about living on forever. In this, he's already grasping for that, right? He's got somebody who's contented with his death, coming forward, and feels like he's done enough and everything, and then finds out it doesn't have to be that way, to some extent, right at the end, basically. But that helps describe, that age aspect, helps describe one of the things that has always bothered me, especially, it does hit me in this. When I looked up the date, I'm kind of like, yeah, that makes more sense in 61. But the stuff from the 70s onward really, really hit me hard, which was these kind of old-timey views. In particular, the way women and men interacted, and especially a sort of, it's weird because I want to say it's misogynistic, but it kind of isn't, in the sense that he holds a lot, his characters often hold a lot of respect for the females in the books, and sometimes treat them kind of deferentially in a sort of odd sort of way, but absolutely sees this sharp distinction between the sexes. Has sort of an anti-homosexual type view throughout it all. Actually, I think this may be the book that comes closest to, I don't really recall, but that comes closest to kind of embracing at least any kind of hint of male homosexuality. And it really kind of flips the switch and is like, everybody kind of recoils from it in the book. But, like old-time Christians, the males will greet each other with a full open-mouthed kiss and stuff along that lines. And they will also be experiencing this group love together, not directly male on male or even female on female, though there is a hint that some of that is kind of going on. That comes in later, and, because for whatever reason, lesbians for a long time were acceptable in a way that, male gays were not, Culture is so fucking weird, But it influences me. I grew up in that era. And, who knows? Anyway. What the hell do I have here? Yeah. So both this and the way he deals with legal matters feels so over the top that I wonder if it's a parody. But I don't know if it really is. So, like, you know, you've got a lot of that kind of 50s feeling to it of, you know, give me a drink, toots, you know, type of stuff. And, you know, patting women on the bottom just as a natural sort of, that's just how we greet them, you know, type of stuff. But more than that, like I said, there's this strict delineation between males and females, and the females are, you know, it's relatively normal for him to have a male, you know, losing an argument or something. I don't know what, but you know, if a female says something that's like talking back, the male will be like, "You better be careful, or I'm gonna spank you," you know. And the female loves that, right? You know? It's very disturbing, and I think he honestly kind of, because he holds on to this throughout so many books, it can't just be a parody. It has to be what's kind of ingrained in how he sees this interaction. But there's still strong characters. It's never written, well, it's seldom written from the female point of view. When it is, it's just as weird. But, you know, they have their own agency, and they're not like weaklings or anything along that line that need to be saved all the time. So there's that, but there's this weird sort of social overlay, right? A gender difference that just, you know, is just so shocking to anything like a modern mind. I mean, I wasn't born all that long after this book was written, and I'm sure that I saw aspects of this still as it was working its way downward and whatnot, and I'm sure they influenced me. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, you know. I mean, not always though. I mean, she went out. She wanted to get work because she was bored. Is kind of the thing, and we needed money, you know. But the main thing was, yeah, you know, and she tried, and didn't like what she was doing, and then ended up volunteering for a while, and then not, you know, which was okay. But it's just a very, very strange feeling there. The way that he expresses relations between men and women, especially in this sort of free love type of circumstance, right? Like, you feel like that would come along with some sort of equality, but I'm not sure how much it did in that hippie era. And this is certainly, you know, before that. Now, there were probably free love things already starting back in this day. They certainly have always been kind of kicking around. In terms of the legal and political stuff, he's got this thing of like, oh, there's this little loophole by which this happens, you know, type of stuff. And that's The Man Who Sold the Moon, that short story. It's a beautiful little short story. It's funny as hell. It's like, you know, playing a trick on the devil or whatever. But the basis of the main character's wealth in this is kind of one of those loopholes. Sort of, kind of. He actually signs away what may be his greatest source of wealth. But he's got other wealth that just comes in from anywhere. And that's a thing that he does in the later stories, too. He makes the main character, almost inconceivably wealthy. So they can do whatever the fuck they want. And what I'd call kind of the secondary main character in this, kind of a father figure to the main character, but is also very wealthy, has not a worry in the world, can afford whatever he wants and needs. In fact, a lot of I don't know about a lot. A couple of the characters in it show up with what seems to be, like there's this reporter who starts out as kind of an important character, but then filters down to being pretty minor later on, who just, is able to expense account big meals and good hotel rooms and this, that, and the other, to an extent that, yeah, I'm not so sure it was ever that easy. I don't know. He doesn't come across as that big a name early on. Later on, maybe he's more important because, at the very least, he has the attention of sort of the head honcho of the government, of the World Federation government, whatever. Not good attention, but, he's a muckraker who is a big enough name that, they know him. But I don't know. It just felt like excess in terms of how much wealth everybody just sort of has. Everybody's at least comfortable, But anyway, yeah, these kind of legal trickeries and everything. Again, it almost feels like a parody of maybe some of the other stuff he did, but I don't know, because he keeps playing around with these things. People being able to invest in the right stuff, making the right choices, and then obviously compounding value and whatnot over time. In this case, he's had 20 years with a trust fund off a relatively large inheritance to begin with. So that's a pretty good amount. And the other guy, the others are working and making money that way. Okay, there's a tendency in this, and I've noticed this in his other books, not in all of them, but when he wants to kind of show passage of time and stuff like that, he clips a bunch of kind of amusing news clips into the narrative. Like a chapter will start with just like, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and some of them have very little impact on the story at all. In fact, most of them do. They're just to give you more of a context around the actions that are going on and the world that you're living in, or that the characters are living in, and how it's different but similar to the era that it's in. They feel funny. They feel like they're out of the early 60s. It's like, what if big technological advances that didn't happen in the 60s did, but also other things, kind of trending stuff. So obviously birth control had come out at that point, and barely, but instead of being something that you kind of privately handled with your doctor, as you have all this time, it was instead, being advertised on TV and everything. And so those little clips are in there. Some of it gives you some catch up to know about major characters that they don't have the time to actually delve into. The story does switch between characters quite a fair amount, and perspectives and whatnot, which can be kind of weird. but you know, we're all one, so it works. Um, yeah, and he ends up using this a lot in those later stories. I He's used it in earlier ones too, though. The same kind of technique. So it's just something that's kind of integral to him across the board. One thing that I noted down that I really kind of wanted to touch on was something that, again, impacted me maybe. I don't know. It's hard to tell because I read it so early. And when I came up with these ideas for myself, it wasn't, you know, that this wasn't on my mind or anything, but it may have been deep down in my subconscious from this. But it was the idea. Honestly, I think Pat Benatar has more at fault for it, but and from Hell is for Children, but that hate requires love. That you can't really hate something unless you love it. Now, I've developed that in different directions from what is done here, but yeah, it's sort of it's the closest that I've seen someone expressing in writing that I can recall, and so it was kind of shocking to run across that. I mean, it seems obvious to me. Like, how can you hate something unless you know you've embraced it enough to love it, right? How can it hurt you enough? I Now, how can it hurt you enough? Well, look, it can destroy something you love, but then do you hate it, or I don't know. I don't know. That's kind of a weird sort of situation, but I feel like to truly hate something, you have to have embraced it, and certainly with individual people, I feel that way. Like you can't hate someone unless you love them. You have to let them in that much. But you know, I mean, what if somebody murders somebody you're close to? Can you hate them? I don't know. Just doesn't feel like you know them deeply enough and understand them enough. Anyway, that was always a feeling for me, and they've got that as one of the little. It's just a little side piece I wanted to kick in there. Um, there's also this odd couple of clips, little snippets of the book, where they essentially go to heaven and look at it from the view of, you know, some dead angels or whatever you want to call them, former religious leaders talking to each other. Um, it's the final tying together and ending to the thing. It felt jarring and odd when I first ran into it. Once you get kind of used to it, it's like okay. But I mean, it felt more like so. I don't know if I covered Terrain in Hell, which is this great, like, sort of satire of Paradise Lost. Um, but in this case, it's kind of like that, you know, and it felt so out of place in a book which felt like it was being agnostic up until then and almost everywhere else in terms of the reality of the religious side of things and of the way afterlives worked and everything. And what it kind of implies when you look at it, given the people involved and some of the things they say, is that basically, and this does get kind of touched on elsewhere, that all religions are true, but they got a lot of it wrong. And that just kind of doesn't work, right? Like, not all religions have an afterlife of the same kind. or necessarily even an afterlife as such. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think, because what's the point of like ancestor worship type religions if there's not something in those spirits that you're doing something for? So maybe, and Buddhism and Hinduism have the reincarnation. So you don't have a spiritual realm that you exist in. You come back. You're stuck here again and again and again. Which I'm not sure how much. Trying to think. Judaism has hell, doesn't really have anything prescribed for you. If you're okay, you know, like maybe the good sign is that you get to end, which I fully embrace, you know. But yeah. Anyway. They're talking about whether, you know, these are some kind of New Age demi-Christians or whatever. Not really New Age, but very much influences the Fosterites. They very much influence the main religion that the main character, Smith, Michael Smith, Valentine Michael Smith. It's really funny about that because like I said, we had a high school class on science fiction, and throughout the book, he's almost always referred to as Michael or Mike by people who know him, and maybe by Smith now and then, or some version of that, depending on his location and time. But in the test questions, he was referred to as Valentine, which felt so wrong to me because, yes, it's his first name, but it's never used. And so I was just thrown off with, who the fuck are they talking about? Which was very, very disturbing. And then I kind of was able to figure out, yeah, that's the main character, but that feels wrong. Anyway. Where am I here? Yeah, that heaven scene felt very, very off-putting to me. And then, yes, it becomes integral to the story, so I understand why it was... Well, it becomes integral to the ending of the story. As kind of, I don't know, the denouement or whatever, the final piece of it, which is amusing and cute and everything, but I don't think it was worth putting in there, and I think it actually weakens everything about the religion, well, about the belief structure that's being put forward in it, as well as in all the later Heinlein books, there is definitely an agnostic stance. And I expected that of him. I felt like that was inherently part of his philosophy. Speaking of his philosophy, this kind of fits in with the legal trickeries and whatnot, and where there's the most conservative bent of Heinlein feels almost like I said, that sort of libertarian, rugged individual type person, but to an almost Ayn Randian point stance of, you know, well, it's my money and I can use it how I like, and anti-government, you know, the government stealing my money type of stuff, and then misusing it and everything like that, which just flows through everything he's got. He wants these little communities of love or whatever that are wealthy and control their own you know, and it feels almost like something like the Branch Davidians or something running off and having their own little commune. And everything he writes feels like it has that kind of flavor to it. This is one of the, this is maybe the only one where that I can recall, it is the only one that I can recall, where the main character takes on the role of an actual Messiah-like cult leader, right? And I feel like Heinlein in this is too warm to that idea. He embraces and kind of looks at all of these religions as frauds and everything, but he embraces that as kind of a good thing in this whole thing. It's necessary, in order to bring the people in and show them truth, you have to fucking fool them. You have to trick them by various means, and it's almost like the Carney show part of the story, in terms of like. That's what the religion is all about. And then there's, layers and circles that feel almost Masonic in nature and everything. He's built up a really interesting structure, and a believable one, and one that you can find kind of amusing. And the question is, I guess that this is more honest science fiction. Like, this is something that's less, I think, infected by his own beliefs. I think what happens is later on, either because of this book and its popularity, or because he was already bent that way, that the things that he puts together in this very much seem to influence and drive his later ideas in writing. He doesn't go back and bring the characters back. I don't think he does. He might. I mean, Number of the Beast and onward start getting so fucking weird. And by the way, he keeps that same attitude there. I mean, even with like the character talking to his AI car is treating it the same way as the women in the 50s type of feeling that I get out of this and out of the 70s books. And that's a book from around 1980. And it keeps going, it keeps going, it keeps going. That same sort of attitude. Now, again, that may make sense, one gets more rigid as they get older in their mindset and whatnot. It's much, much harder to be flexible and kind of see where change is needed in perspective, if nothing else. The end of the book is absolutely inevitable. I think I would know what would happen, what happens. I didn't realize quite how brutal it was in description. I found that a little bit disturbing, because I picture things a little too much, maybe, whatever. But I'm also, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, the religion itself is weird because it comes from the way it starts out and is based on the way that this guy who was raised on Mars was taught to be a Martian. And it's a different species. It operates differently. And humans are very, very different in some key aspects, notably that there are two sexes. But the knowledge of this stuff from Mars essentially makes you able to do magic. You can teleport, you can make things go away you don't want, you can do whatever the hell you like. And obviously that is, you can disappear walls, whatever. But you have to really know Martian to be able to do these things. And even the main character kind of doesn't know that to begin with. Um, I don't know where I was going with all of this. But anyway, obviously, it creates a reason for the different layers and circles of knowledge, a sort of Gnostic type of system that fits the Templars and fits the Masonics and whatnot. You have to work your way through these different layers of knowledge to be able to be fully capable in a way that the secrets of our real world parallels don't have. There it's like, oh, there's a secret handshake or something like this, and that makes you more important within the organization, but it doesn't make you able to do magic, right? Well, this one makes you able to do magic. It's sort of the promise of the secret that these things kind of allude to, or maybe explicitly made it at some point in terms of like mystery cults and stuff like that may have actually pretended to that. So that's kind of the conceit of the religion that we have here, which is that, yeah, he actually can create a mystery cult that fulfills the promises, of this greater power and everything in a way that's not just, yeah, I got connections, man. I get to hang out with a couple of Supreme Court justices at my special grove, and make sure they get what they want. They make sure I get what I need. But that's already, to me, that's the science fiction, right? That's the magic of the story, as opposed to actually going to the afterworld and whatnot, where this weird heaven thing is happening, where it's like, yeah, I felt like that part took away from the importance of the story and the meaning of it all and everything. It made it more like, I don't know, that particular element made me feel like I was reading what's his name? Fletcher Pratt. I'm probably getting this. I don't know. Anyway, it felt more like too much like slapstick or something. And in addition to that side of things, I don't know. Do I really want to go into the cannibalism part, right? It's pretty minor when it comes down to it, because it doesn't really apply to humans in the same way. But at the end, they eat him, And I'm kind of like, okay, that's cool. It's the only person who gets eaten. He gets made into stew, and that's great. In terms of past influences on me and whatnot, there was one other that I wanted to point out, which was when I went to college first time, when I first got there. One of my friends that I immediately kind of bonded with apparently had read this not long before, because he was quoting it and acting sort of in a manner that fit and kind of accepted some of it. Now, there is sort of an another thing that fits with my own belief system is the underlying "Thou art God," and this is the thing I remember from that friend, is that he would say that a lot. You know, not an annoying lot, but enough that I'm like, okay, you read that. Which, to me, and from what I see of from the book, is really that kind of pantheistic. Everything there's a singular everything that's God, you know, and that whatever is. There's a problem with that kind of feeling and that kind of religious stance, which is, look, it's not personal in and of itself. Now, you could fit my sort of animistic beliefs into this to some extent, I guess. In the same way that I built up from animism to that kind of oneness, you can work your way down the same sort of way, and at least maintain at least temporal individuals. Doesn't make a lot of sense to be putting them in the heaven story again. And that's why it just feels so discordant. Like I have, it's hard to believe, but it's kind of like, well, you know, are there unicorns? Yes, there are unicorns, because we can conceive of them. You know, anything that we conceive of, anything that we create an ideal of, even if it doesn't have a real world analog, has some sort of existence of some type, which means that heaven does have some sort of existence, but is it separate from our thinking? I don't know. That seems to create a problem. It seems like it's a composite of how we think about it, like ideals, ideas, freedom, love, all these things. They only have a reality because we imagine them, we think them. Anyway, this is one that I would definitely keep. Not going to, because I borrowed it. Like I said, I had a copy. I think I borrowed my first copy from the library, and it's just one that I've never run across. It's okay. I'll probably never get around to rereading the books that I keep at this point. That's why they're getting dumped behind a wall of games, essentially. It's just a matter of, well, yeah, if I do live that long, I'll dig them out and I'll have them and whatever. But yeah, it was really cool that I got a chance to reread this. That much I have to say, because there's a lot that I forgot about it. I knew how it would end from the very beginning, you know, just because, yes, I had read it and it had affected me. As opposed to another Heinlein story, which is, The Mysterious Profession of Jonathan Hoag. The Bird is Cruel. Which I remember being terrified of the ending every fucking time I read it. But then the last time I read it, and I still don't know what the ending is, it was just this incredible letdown. It's like the ending is something that you fear, and the book builds you up to it, and then it just ends up kind of pedestrian. It ends up nowhere near as important. So, like, just gets passed away, but, like, the fear of what the ending is going to be is so massive. That just, I don't even know. I don't know if that's a powerful thing or not. But the way he builds up the tension in that story is so tremendous, and that you expect so much, and then to be let down in the way you are, To me, there's something almost masterful about doing that because I always want to go back to it and figure out what the fuck, how did it end? Now I know, don't bother anymore. It's not worth it. But yeah, the first few times I'd be like, yeah, I remember this story. How does it end? How does it end? Maybe it'll be scary. Maybe it'll change. I don't know. Anyway, let's load this up and get it out.